Welcome to our first class on media ethics. Today we're going to talk about what do we mean when we talk about ethics, and we also want to lay out some ethics principles that we'll be using in this class. A code of ethics articulates a profession's values. They're the moral principles that govern an individual or profession's behavior. Okay, before we move on, we should talk about what do we mean by a profession. Many of you are mass comm majors, perhaps business majors, or even criminal justice majors, and chances are you might seek a job within your profession when you graduate. It's likely also that your profession will have its own code of ethics that you're expected to follow. They're voluntary. They're not like legal rules. However, usually when they're breached, there's some kind of a sanction that you might incur. Some common characteristics of a profession are that many require extensive training or intellectual training, like academia. Many serve the public interest. Many require credentialing, like teaching. Stress autonomy, or kind of individualism. And many professions, you're evaluated by your peers. I thought I'd give you a look at some examples of some of the code of ethics of organizations. This one's for Actors Equity, and that's a union of actors. And if you look through these, they just make sense, don't they? Do not rehearse or perform without a signed equity contract. Give your best possible performance. I mean, that's what actors do anyway. So most of these are just kind of good common sense. Here's just a few from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Officers shall not violate any law or any agency policy, rule, or procedure. Well, that's what we would expect from our law enforcement chiefs of police. And I realize that probably very few of you are actually going to go out and work as journalists, reporters, broadcasters. However, for our purposes, we are going to use the Code of Ethics embraced by the Society of Professional Journalists. And that's a professional association of reporters, editors, photographers. And again, most of these just make good common sense. Seek truth and report it. Well, that's really what we expect from reporters, right? Act independently, minimize harm, and be accountable. And by the end of this class, you'll have these principles committed to memory. What I'm going to do is break these down one by one and show you plenty of examples. Okay, seek truth and report it, and that's just fundamental to our democracy, right? Journalists have often been referred to as the fourth estate, meaning they're intended to kind of help maintain a checks and balances on the judicial system, the legislative system, and the executive branch. Journalists should be honest, fair, and courageous in gathering, reporting, and interpreting information. Here's kind of a whimsical example. I ask you, does this breach an ethics? Seek truth and report it. As you can see, this is a Newsweek cover featuring Diana, were she alive, and celebrating her 50th birthday. Here's kind of a fun fact. Newsweek no longer publishes as a hard copy magazine. It's available online only. Well, the editor at the time, Tina Brown, thought she'd have some fun creating these digital portraits and images of Princess Di. There's a whole sort of cover story inside. There's images of Diana on a cell phone. There's images of her Facebook page were she to have one. This one's a little more jarring. This is the cover photo on the Daily News. The Daily News is out of New York, and it's what's referred to as a tabloid newspaper. And tabloids, kind of as a convention, are usually much more sensational. And we're really not used to seeing photographs this truthful on the front pages of newspapers. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of very sort of graphic imagery here. Then there's the New York Post. It's kind of a more conservative version of the news. It's also a tabloid magazine, and it's also extremely sensational. And it always has kind of shocking front page photos as well. And this one says, pushed on the subway track, this man is about to die, doomed. And sure enough, he was killed just seconds after this photograph was taken. And of course, the New York Post was criticized for using such a disturbing photo on its cover. As a little backstory, too, this photograph was taken by a freelance journalist who was on his way to another shoot. And of course, there was a backlash to him as well. You know, what were you doing taking pictures when you could have been helping to save this man? And his response was, I was much further away than this picture appears to be. And there was no time to try to save him. But what I did was use my flash photography to try to attract the driver's attention. Of course, he published the photos and he sold them to the New York Post. This one's a little more whimsical. Can you be too truthful in sports coverage? As you can probably deduce, this is the Canadian team after winning the gold medal at the 2010 Olympics. And here they are celebrating on the ice. And I think that was what was really at issue, not so much that they were celebrating and engaged in kind of unfeminine behavior, but that they were doing it on the ice. There's a lot more photos of them smoking cigars, drinking champagne out of a bottle, drinking beers and things like that. And there was they received a backlash from the Olympic Committee about their behavior. Here's another jarring photo. What happens when the truth hurts? And this is a young Syrian boy in the aftermath of a bombing. This is actually a still photo from a video piece that appeared throughout the news. And here's an interesting sort of sidebar to this story. Here's just a short clip from a piece that aired on CNN. And so you can see my headline here, does crime detract from objectivity? You know, anchors, particularly on news organizations like NBC, CBS, CNN, really are trained professionally to be somewhat objective, to remain calm, to be poised. And look what happens here.
In America, it's the twilight of summer. Most 5-year-olds are enjoying their last days of summer freedom or starting school for the very first time. They're talking about superheroes. They're talking about playground slides. But in other places, they're dying. They're surviving. And many somewhere in between. According to activists, this is Omran. He lives with his mom, his dad, and his brother and his sister. Their home is inside Aleppo, Syria. It was hit by a bomb, an airstrike. Who's behind it, we do not know. He and his family were pulled alive from what's left of their home after being buried in the rubble.